What would you do if you saw a gorilla cradling a lion cub like his own child? Would you run, or would you watch as something sacred unfolded in front of you? This is not a fairy tale. There's no circus, no experiment, no trainer behind the scenes. Just a wild gorilla named Brutus, abandoned, broken, and a lion cub named Leo, left to die after a battle his pride couldn't win, but together. They built something the world doesn't have a name for. Not friendship, not instinct, but love. A boy who barely spoke found his voice. A ranger who could barely walk stood up again. And in the heart of Zion Canyon, where no one was supposed to find each other, they found family. Some say it's nature, others say it's a miracle. We believe it was the hand of God. And if you believe that love can cross species, silence and scars stay with us. This is a story you won't forget. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The winds had finally died down over Zion Canyon, Utah, just hours before. A thunderstorm had torn through the region like a wild beast, slashing at the red rock cliffs and ancient sycamores with torrents of rain and howling gusts. The air now lay heavy with moisture, and steam rose from the canyon floor where the early morning sun pierced the mist like golden blades. The world felt quiet in the aftermath, too quiet, as though something had been broken and the canyon was holding its breath. Deep within a crevice carved by millennia of erosion, something stirred. Brutus, a silverback gorilla nearing 20 years of age, moved slowly through the ravine. He was a mountain of muscle and silence, standing nearly 6 feet tall with a broad chest and thick arms furred in coarse charcoal black. His silver-tinged back glimmered dully in the filtered light. But it was his face that stopped people cold, if any human had ever seen him up close. His dark eyes were deep wells of solitude, and his brow held a quiet ache, as if he carried too many memories for one creature to bear. Brutus had not always lived alone, smuggled into the U.S. as an infant in a forgotten trafficking ring that was later busted. He'd spent years in illegal captivity before escaping into the Zion wilderness during a transport accident. Since then, he'd vanished into the shadows of the canyon. Locals spoke of him in whispers. The canyon ghost. They called him. But Brutus didn't care for legends. He cared for silence and survival. The storm had made him uneasy, forcing him to seek higher ground. As he descended a slope lined with loose shale and damp cedar roots, something strange caught his attention, a sound so faint it barely existed. A cry, high-pitched, frightened, alive. Brutus halted, his massive frame stilled like a boulder. The cry came again, muffled, trembling. He followed the sound. It led him to a shallow cave, partially hidden by a tangle of storm-toppled branches. Inside, curled into the damp earth, was a creature that didn't belong in the canyon. A cub, tiny, trembling, golden-furred with faint rosettes still visible on its baby-soft coat. Its paws twitched weakly, and its ribs pushed visibly beneath thin skin. A lion cub, alone. Brutus stared at it for a long while, unmoving. Instinct whispered for him to leave. This wasn't his problem. But something deeper, older, echoed inside him. A memory of cradling another small creature. The ache in his chest flared. The cub cried out once more, barely a whisper now. Brutus stepped forward and gently scooped the cub into his arms. Meanwhile, a mile south of the canyon floor, the air smelled of wet pine and spring mud near a wooden cabin tucked against the slope. Inside, Maya Dawson sat quietly by a window, her eyes fixed on the rain-slicked trails below. She was 28, with sun-browned skin and ash-blonde hair tied in a loose bun. A faded Green Ranger uniform hung in her closet, unworn for weeks. Maya had been a rising star in the National Park Service. Brave, sharp-eyed, known for her compassion toward both tourists and wildlife, but everything changed during a rescue operation 2 months ago. A rock slide had crushed her left leg while she was helping a lost hiker. The injury left her temporarily dependent on crutches, and the trauma cut deeper than any wound. Her confidence, like her stride, had been fractured. Now, she watched the world from behind glass, waiting for something to feel whole again. "Ben's still not back," she called. "Nope," came a voice from outside. Ben Dawson, her 11-year-old brother, stood barefoot on the porch, headphones draped around his neck and a small recording device in his hand. He was small for his age, with sandy hair, quiet eyes, and a habit of talking to birds. A gentle soul who hated loud places and loved silence, except the kind filled with nature's breath. Since Maya's accident, Ben had taken it upon himself to record the sounds of healing, wandering deeper into the woods each day to gather birdsong, water drips, wind through leaves. He never strayed far until today. "I'm going to check the lower trails," Ben said, already slinging his canvas bag over his shoulder. "Not too far." "Okay," Maya called after him, concern lining her voice. "I won't." He answered, but he was lying, back in the canyon. Brutus reached his hidden shelter, an abandoned eagle's perch high in the rock face, inaccessible to predators and invisible from the trails. He laid the cub gently on a bed of dry moss and leaves. It whimpered, curling into his furred chest. He didn't know why he had taken it, only that he couldn't leave it. The wind picked up again, soft and sighing like a mother's breath. Brutus looked out across the canyon walls, red and raw in the morning light, and listened, not for danger, but for life. He would stay, and so would the cub. For now, the heat returned to Zion Canyon slowly, creeping over the craggy red cliffs with a morning warmth that softened the wet stone. Yesterday's storm had passed, but the memory of its force still clung to the soil in slick patches and puddled corners, above the cliffside ledges, where only hawks and secrets dared to live. A gorilla stirred quietly in his perch. Brutus sat cross-legged beneath the shelter of an overhanging rock, a thick-browed silhouette against the rising sun. His massive arms rested in his lap, and nestled within them, curled like a whisper, was the lion cub he had rescued. Leo had barely moved through the night, too weak, too small, but he had survived. That was something. Brutus had no milk to offer, no meat suitable for a carnivore, but he had something else. Memory. Years in captivity had taught him how humans fed infants, how caretakers blended fruits and grains into paste. Now, he gathered what he knew, soft berries mashed with sap from a healing plant he once used for an injured paw. His hands were clumsy in tenderness, but patient. He pressed the mixture between 2 broad fingers and offered it to the cub's mouth. Leo whimpered at first, unfamiliar with the smell, then instinct one, a slow lick, then another. The sweetness was strange, but it fed him. As the cub's small tongue worked to draw in more, Brutus leaned back, his eyes heavy with something like relief. The sound of Leo swallowing. It was a sound that felt like breath itself. Across the canyon, Maya Dawson sat on the porch of the ranger cabin, staring at the sky. Her crutches leaned against the rail. She hadn't used them that morning. Her hair, usually tied up, hung loose against her shoulders, golden and wild. There was a softness to her face when she wasn't trying to be strong. But this morning, That softness was interrupted by curiosity. "Ben?" she called inside. "Did you say you heard something strange yesterday?" Ben Dawson, still in his pajamas, padded out with a small device clutched in both hands. He was pale and wide-eyed, not from fear, but from the thrill of mystery. "Yeah." He said it was a roar, but not like a cougar or a bear. It was deeper, like something lonely. He played it back. A low rumble echoed from the speaker, not loud, but rich, like it came from a chest the size of a car. Maya's brows lifted. "That's not local wildlife." "There's more," Ben said, scrolling. "Right after it, listen." Another sound followed. This one was higher, a tiny squeal, not quite a growl, more like a cub. Maya froze. "Play that again." He did, and again. "That's a lion cub," she whispered. "But there aren't any lions here, not in this canyon." They stared at each other, for the first time in weeks. Maya reached for her hiking boots without hesitation. Later that afternoon, the two of them began walking the nearby ridge. Maya moved cautiously, but with determination, using a light brace on her left leg instead of crutches. Ben carried his recorder like a compass. They didn't know what they were looking for, only that the world was whispering, and they had finally chosen to listen. Meanwhile, Brutus watched Leo attempt to stand for the first time. The cub's legs wobbled under his own weight, his golden fur, still slightly damp in patches, bristled with each breeze. But he tried, he fell, and tried again. Brutus watched without interfering, only shifting closer when Leo let out a weak, frustrated cry, the gorilla's hand cupped around the cub, drawing him near, not as a predator might, but like a father would. Leo nuzzled into the thick fur of Brutus's arm, pressing his small face into the warmth. Above them, a hawk circled once and vanished into the sky. Farther south, Maya and Ben discovered strange markings along a rock wall, a print, large and round, too large for a bear, but not human. Maya crouched beside it. "This isn't possible," she murmured. "It's almost primate." Ben kneeled beside her. "Do gorillas even live here?" "No," Maya said slowly, her eyes tracing the slope upward. "But that doesn't mean one didn't find its way here." She looked out over the vast canyon spread before them. The thought sat heavy in her chest. Something wild was hiding here, something that didn't belong and yet, somehow, did. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, they turned back toward the cabin. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it. They weren't alone anymore, back at the rocky ledge. Leo had curled back into Brutus's side. The gorilla chewed slowly on a sprig of bitterroot, eyes fixed on the horizon. He didn't know what the morning would bring, or what danger might find them tomorrow. But tonight, under the quieting sky, there were only two heartbeats in this world, steady, strong, and somehow in rhythm. One born of the jungle, one born of the savannah, bound by loss, held together by breath, and neither of them, in this moment, was truly alone. The sun had not yet crested the jagged ridgeline when the silence of the upper canyon was broken, not by the calls of birds, but by the sharp crunch of boots against stone. Three men moved quietly through the undergrowth, dressed in olive and tan, their faces half covered with worn bandanas. They carried rifles, weathered, scratched, and cold like their expressions. The leader of the group, Hank Collier, was a man in his late 40s with a stocky build and a gait that suggested years of navigating backwoods and bending laws. His graying beard was patchy and unkempt, and his eyes were a cold, calculated blue. Hank had spent a decade smuggling exotic animals across state lines, and what he'd heard on the radio scanner 2 days ago intrigued him. Unidentified primate tracks spotted by hikers in Zion. The reward from black market collectors would be worth the hike and the risk. Beside him walked Tyler Riggs, tall, wiry, with long red hair tied into a greasy ponytail. Tyler was younger, quicker on his feet, but lacked the instincts of leadership. The third, Marvin Tate, brought up the rear, heavy-set, soft-spoken, and perpetually nervous. Marvin always looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but he owed Hank, and Hank always collected. They moved with purpose, using old poaching routes long forgotten by authorities, and after nearly 2 hours of searching, they found it, a crude path leading up a sloped rock face. Faint impressions in the mud, too large to be human, too rounded for bear. Tyler squatted beside it. Definitely primate. He muttered, no claws, just pads and knuckles. Hank's lips curled. Told you, we catch this thing. We're out of debt for life. Above, unaware of the danger inching closer. Brutus sat silently at the edge of his shelter. His body was still, but his ears twitched at the rustle of distant movement. Below him, Leo was napping, belly full, limbs sprawled awkwardly in the morning sun. The cub had grown stronger, louder, more lion than baby now, but still unprepared for the threat that loomed. Brutus didn't move yet. The wind carried odd scents, human sweat, gunmetal, tobacco. His jaw tensed across the canyon. Maya Dawson adjusted the scope of her borrowed binoculars, her leg still stiff from the injury. She braced against a boulder, scanning the terrain. Ben stood beside her, his recorder slung around his neck, holding a hand-drawn map based on the sounds they'd tracked the night before. Anything Ben asked. Squinting. Wait, she whispered. There. Movement. 3 men, not rangers. Ben followed her gaze. The men crept like predators, heads low, weapons drawn. What are they doing here? Maya's voice darkened. They're poachers. Ben's eyes widened. They're heading toward the prince. Maya's heart thudded. We have to stop them. Meanwhile, Brutus finally saw them, 3 intruders below the ledge. He stood to his full height, chest rising, silver fur catching the light like armor. Tyler froze as his eyes caught movement above. He raised his rifle without thinking. There he shouted, "It's real!" Brutus stepped forward with a warning snarl, deep, guttural, ancient. The men didn't heed it. Hank raised his weapon, but before he could aim, a voice echoed through the canyon. Put the guns down. Maya stood exposed on a ridge across the way, one arm raised, the other gripping her crutch like a spear. Her voice cracked the air like thunder behind her. Ben shouted, "Stop," startled. The poachers hesitated. Brutus seized the moment. With the strength of a falling boulder, he launched downward, teeth bared in a roar that made the canyon shake. Leo shrieked behind him. Hank fired, a miss. Tyler stumbled back. Marvin dropped his rifle and bolted. The silverback reached the base of the ledge with terrifying speed, slamming his fists into the ground. Dust exploded around him. Hank fired again, grazing Brutus's shoulder. Brutus flinched but kept coming, pushing them back with pure presence. From the ridge, Maya moved fast, faster than she had since the accident. She dropped her crutch halfway down and ran, limping, breathless, but moving. Her boot skidded across loose dirt, but she didn't stop. She ran toward a creature she should have feared, but she didn't. Brutus noticed. He paused, not because of pain, but because of her. Maya stood between him and the poachers now, hands out, chest heaving. "We're not your enemy," she shouted. Hank raised his rifle again, but Brutus moved first, this time not to attack, but to block. He stood between Maya and the muzzle of the gun, In that suspended second, something passed between them, gorilla and woman, protector and witness. Ben, now close enough to be heard, screamed, "The Rangers are coming. We called them." It was a bluff, but a powerful one. Tyler dropped his gun. Marvin was already gone. Hank hesitated, then cursed, spat, and followed his men back into the brush. And suddenly, it was over. Silence settled over the canyon like dust. Brutus turned, limping slightly, and returned to Leo, who had climbed down partway to find him. The cub nuzzled into his father's chest, purring faintly. Maya watched, tears brimming. Ben stepped beside her. "He saved us." He whispered. She nodded. "We saved each other." And from that moment on, Brutus no longer saw humans as just danger. Sometimes, they were the reason the wild still had hope. The late afternoon light filtered gently through the tall pine trees as Maya and Ben trudged up the winding trail leading to the Zion Wildlife Rehabilitation Outpost, perched near a plateau overlooking the southern rim of the canyon. The outpost had once been used to care for injured deer and raptors. Today, it was about to shelter something no one had ever imagined, a silverback gorilla and a lion cub, not captured, not tamed, but welcomed. Brutus limped slowly behind Maya, towering and cautious. His massive body moved with strength, but each step favored his left side, where the bullet had grazed him. His fur had dried and clumped slightly where Maya had cleaned the wound with antiseptic spray, a task she'd performed gently, her hands shaking the whole time. She had whispered to him as she worked, not commands, just kindness, not because she expected him to understand, but because it felt wrong to treat him like a beast. Leo, meanwhile, trotted just ahead of Ben, tail flicking, ears twitching with curiosity. The cub had grown visibly in recent days, his once wobbly legs now strong enough to pounce on twigs and tumble clumsily in the dust. His golden eyes would often flick back to Brutus for reassurance, as if tethered by invisible thread. The outpost wasn't much. 2 low wooden buildings, a shed, and a broad open space ringed by sturdy fencing. But it was safe, and right now, that was everything. Awaiting them at the entrance was Jack Moreno, the on-site caretaker. Jack was in his mid-60s, with dark skin weathered by decades under the Utah sun, a slow gait from 2 knee replacements, and a face framed by wiry gray hair. He wore a faded ranger hat and a canvas vest that had more pockets than anyone could count. Jack was known for saying little and seeing much. As Brutus stepped into view, Jack's thick brows rose, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he set down his thermos and approached slowly, eyes on the gorilla, then on Maya. "I've seen bears," he said, voice low. "Seen a cougar once chewing on my Jeep mirror. But I've never seen this. He's not what he looks like." Maya replied. Jack studied the great beast for a moment. "Looks like he's tired and hurt." Brutus remained still, chest rising with each steady breath. "And the cub?" Jack asked. Ben stepped forward, one hand hovering near Leo's shoulder. "His name's Leo," he said quietly. "He's Brutus's." Jack didn't laugh. Instead, he turned and waved them in. "Then they're both welcome. Let's figure it out from there." Inside the main enclosure, they set up a temporary shelter, half natural logs, half canvas roof. Brutus watched every motion, but didn't interfere. When Maya laid down fresh water and fruit, he waited until she stepped back before approaching. His trust was cautious, but real. Ben, meanwhile, knelt beside Leo with a small wooden bowl of goat milk. The cub sniffed it, then lapped hungrily. Ben grinned. The evening passed in near silence. broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Maya sat beside the enclosure, scribbling in a leather-bound journal. Her notes weren't just observations, they were plans. She proposed a bold idea to designate the canyon's upper plateau as a protected sanctuary zone, a hybrid between wild and human care. Not cages, not captivity, but a space where creatures like Brutus and Leo could live with dignity, safe from bullets and fear. She would pitch the proposal to the Utah Wildlife Federation the following week, but tonight she just watched. Watched Brutus settle in beside the sleeping lion cub. Watched her little brother sit in the grass, speaking softly to the wind. Watched something impossible become real. Later, as the sky darkened, Ben remained in the enclosure just outside the barrier. He sat cross-legged, a stuffed raccoon in his lap, tattered from years of companionship. Leo approached slowly, pawing at the toy. Ben smiled. "You like that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Leo sniffed the raccoon, then batted it with his paw. He looked at Ben, really looked at him, and let out a small, questioning chirp. Ben's throat tightened. He hadn't spoken much since Maya's accident, not beyond the short, quiet phrases. But now, something cracked open. "He's not a pet." Ben said aloud, "He's family." The words hung in the air, still imperfect. Maya looked up from the journal. Eyes wide, Jack, who had been sitting nearby whittling a piece of cedar, paused mid-stroke. Ben didn't seem to notice. He just reached out and gently touched Leo's ear. "He's family," he repeated. Spring came early to Zion Canyon that year. The air held a crisp sweetness, and the winds carried not just the scent of pine and sagebrush, but the weight of time passing. A whole year had swept over the plateau since Brutus and Leo first arrived at the sanctuary. And nothing, not wind, nor instinct, nor fear, could erase the story etched into this land by two unlikely hearts. Leo had grown into a young male lion of formidable presence, his mane, once a soft halo, now cascaded around his neck in golden waves, darker at the base, sunlit at the tips. His body stretched long and lean, with rippling muscles shaped by quiet hunts, playful pounces, and the endless climbs up canyon ridges that would confuse even the most daring mountain goats. Yet, no matter how large he became, when Brutus sat beside him, Leo still leaned his head against the gorilla's shoulder, as if he were still that frightened cub tucked beneath furred arms. Brutus, now 21, had grayed slightly more at the muzzle, but his power had not dimmed. What had changed was the calm in his eyes, a kind of peace, perhaps, or maybe acceptance. He had always been a shadow on the edge of the world, a ghost of survival. But here, among red rocks and rustling grasses, he had found something more than refuge. He had found kinship. The sanctuary had grown too. Maya Dawson, now fully recovered and strong in both step and spirit, had returned to full ranger duty. She moved across the land with the sure-footed grace of someone who had been broken and rebuilt, stronger not in spite of her pain, but because of it. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was often pulled back beneath a wide-brimmed ranger hat, and her voice carried quiet authority. But her eyes, once dimmed by fear, now burned with purpose. She and her younger brother, Ben, had co-founded a conservation initiative called Hearts Across Species, a program that brought schools, scientists, and animal behaviorists to Zion to witness what had happened between Brutus and Leo and to imagine what could happen elsewhere. Ben, now 12, had grown taller, his voice just beginning to deepen. He was still quiet around strangers, but with animals, he was a fountain of energy. He spent his afternoons logging observations, recording animal calls, and mapping out a documentary about Leo's transformation, and every morning, without fail. He sat with Brutus under the sycamore tree near the edge of the open range, but change was coming, in recent weeks. Leo had begun to linger near the fence line at dusk. He would sit still, body taut, golden eyes locked on the distant wilderness that lay beyond the protected hills. He sniffed the wind like it carried a secret meant only for him. Brutus noticed, he always noticed. One morning, Leo didn't eat. He paced, restless. He circled the perimeter, then returned to sit beside Brutus with his head low and his tail twitching. That night, his roar echoed louder than any before, deep, resonant, a call not for comfort but for something unknown. Maya approached Brutus quietly after hearing the roar. He sat alone beneath the stars, Leo sleeping nearby. "You know it's time, don't you?" she whispered. Brutus didn't move, but she saw it in the stillness of his breath. The next day, just after sunrise, Brutus stood and nudged Leo awake. The lion blinked, confused, then rose to his feet. Brutus turned and began walking, not toward the feeding enclosure, not toward the cabin, but toward the canyon's rim, where a gate had once been closed to the outside. Maya and Ben stood nearby, silently watching. Brutus stopped at the boundary and waited. Leo came beside him. The two looked out over the valley, where the land stretched wide and wild, untamed, dangerous, and free. Brutus looked at Leo, then slowly, gently, placed one great hand on the lion's mane. A moment, a breath. Then Brutus stepped back. Leo didn't move at first. Then he turned his head, looking into Brutus's eyes. He opened his jaws and let out a roar. It was not angry. It was not mournful. It was a vow. Then, with the grace only a lion can carry, Leo bounded down the hill, his body a blur of strength and sunlight. Brutus watched until the figure vanished behind the brush. 3 months passed. The sanctuary continued its work. Visitors came from universities and animal welfare groups. Maya led talks. Ben shared his recordings. Brutus remained mostly withdrawn, but still allowed Ben near. Still watched the horizon at sunset. Then, on the first day of spring, it happened. A rumble echoed down the canyon trail. It was not thunder. It was a roar, mature, clear, and unmistakably Leo's from the northern ridge. A golden shape emerged, taller, stronger, his mane now full and wild, his eyes older but still filled with something warm. He returned. Ben was the first to spot him and cried out. Maya dropped her clipboard, tears already welling. Brutus, who had been sitting beneath his favorite tree, rose slowly. He did not rush. Leo approached, not with the urgency of a cub, but with the calm of one who had come home. He stopped a few feet from Brutus. The gorilla stepped forward. They did not embrace. They did not make noise. But Leo dipped his head, and Brutus touched his brow to the lion's, and the air between them was full. The two sat together beneath the tree until the sun dipped behind the canyon walls. That night, Maya recorded in her journal. A lion roared, and the echo came not from his own kind, but from the heart of a silverback who had once believed he was alone, but family. It isn't about blood. It's about choosing not to leave when it would be easier to walk away. Sometimes, love takes the most unexpected form, in a world that teaches us to fear what is different. This story reminds us that family is not always about blood, and healing can come from the most unlikely places. Who would have thought that a gorilla, once lost and broken, could raise a lion with the heart of a father, or that a silent boy would find his voice through the bond of wild creatures? That's the quiet miracle. We believe it's not just chance, it's grace. It's a gentle nudge from God, reminding us that in every canyon of our lives, He is there, in the broken places, in the silent moments, in the love that crosses all boundaries. Brutus and Leo found each other through pain, but what they built together was something sacred. And maybe that's what God is asking us too, not to judge by appearances, not to fear the unfamiliar, but to open our hearts to the unexpected. If this story touched you, we invite you to share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment below what this meant to you. And if you believe in miracles, in second chances, and in the love that only God can create, type Amen in the comments. Subscribe to our channel for more true stories of compassion, courage, and connection, and may God bless you and your family with the kind of love that never lets go.